In the quiet echoes of time, there are names that never fade. They belong to the faces and voices that shape generations, filling our screens, our arenas, and our imaginations. From the golden glow of Richard Chamberlain's television reign to George Foreman's thunderous fists that shook the boxing world. From Val Kilmer's raw intensity on screen to Gene Hackman's unmatched command of character and the surreal visions of David Lynch that forever bent the rules of storytelling. Their departures mark not just the loss of individuals, but the closing of entire chapters in culture itself. As we revisit their journeys, we ask what made their presence so unforgettable, and why do their legacies continue to resonate even after the final curtain has fallen. Richard Chamberlain, born in 1934, became one of television's first global idols. His role as Dr. James Kildare in the early 1960s catapulted him into fame, with millions tuning in weekly to watch his calm, dignified portrayal of a young physician. Yet Chamberlain refused to be trapped by typecasting. He crossed into classical theater, proving himself as Hamlet and other Shakespearean leads, before returning triumphantly to television in the era of epic miniseries. Titles such as Centennial Shogun and The Thornbirds established him as the king of the miniseries, able to command sweeping novelistic stories with patience and grace. His screen presence combined handsome composure with underlying vulnerability, offering audiences both glamour and substance. Off-screen, he carefully maintained privacy, but his 2003 memoir, Shattered Love, revealed candor that deepened respect for him as an artist and a person. By the time he entered his later years, Chamberlain stood not just as a star, but as a model of reinvention, discipline, and resilience in a demanding industry. After his early fame with Dr. Kildare, Chamberlain deliberately sought roles that stretched beyond the limits of a television idol. He turned to the stage in England, embracing Shakespeare to prove that his artistry could outlast youthful popularity. This training forged a deeper confidence that carried into the golden era of television miniseries, where his work in Shogun and The Thornbirds defined a generation's viewing habits. These projects demanded stamina, emotional complexity, and the ability to sustain character arcs across hours, and Chamberlain mastered them with steady authority. By the 1990s, the frenzy of leading man roles eased, but Chamberlain maintained a versatile career. He accepted guest roles on television, ventured into musical theater, and selected parts that allowed him to explore character rather than celebrity. His 2003 memoir, Shattered Love, marked a turning point not only in his public image, but in Hollywood itself. By openly acknowledging his sexuality, he confronted the secrecy he had long endured, and in doing so, gave new resonance to performances that often carried an undertone of longing and restraint. In his final years, Chamberlain divided time between Hawaii and Los Angeles, choosing projects sparingly and enjoying a quieter rhythm of life. Colleagues remembered his courtesy and precision. Fans recalled the evenings when families gathered around the television to follow his epic journeys. For Chamberlain, the later decades were not a decline, but a refinement, proof that an actor's greatest strength can lie in pacing patience and dignity. Richard Chamberlain passed away on March 29, 2025, at the age of 90 from complications of a stroke. He died at his home in Waimanalo, Hawaii, a place he had long cherished as a retreat from the demands of Hollywood. His longtime partner, Martin Rabbit, was by his side, offering the same quiet support that had anchored Chamberlain's later life. The news of his death rippled quickly through entertainment circles. Former co-stars spoke of his professionalism and generosity, while fans around the world revisited clips of Dr. Kildare's Shogun and The Thornbirds, remembering the calm authority and tender vulnerability he brought to every role. Journalists noted the symmetry. A man who had defined television's golden age left the stage in a peaceful, almost cinematic closing scene. And yet the question remains, was his graceful passing simply the final act of a carefully curated career? Or did it reveal something deeper about a man who spent decades balancing image with authenticity? The mystery of Richard Chamberlain is not in how he lived or even how he died, but in the poise with which he carried both. Richard Chamberlain's legacy rests on the quiet power of longevity and reinvention. He proved that television could deliver not only entertainment, but also sweeping novelistic drama that rivaled the emotional scope of cinema. As the king of the miniseries, his work in Shogun and the Thornbirds set the standard for storytelling that demanded patience, depth, and intimacy. Beyond his screen presence, Chamberlain modeled the courage to reshape one's career and identity. His decision to embrace stage work in midlife and later to speak candidly about his private life in Shattered Love reframed him as more than a star. He became a symbol of authenticity in an era that often demanded concealment. Following his death, tributes poured in from colleagues, critics, and fans who highlighted his discipline, elegance, and humanity. For many, the grief carried an unusual gentleness, as if Chamberlain himself had prepared the world for a graceful goodbye. His roles remain accessible not only as nostalgic artifacts, but as living reminders of how artistry and integrity can endure. Richard Chamberlain will be remembered as more than an actor. He was a craftsman who wrote part of television's history with patience, dignity, and heart. George Foreman embodied reinvention. Born in 1949, he roared from a tough Houston childhood to Olympic gold in 1968 and 2 reigns as heavyweight champion, first as a terrifying puncher in the 1970s, and then after a decade as a preacher returning in middle age to reclaim the title at 45, the oldest heavyweight champion in history. His rivalry with Muhammad Ali, especially the 1974 Rumble in the Jungle, made him a global figure. His late career knockout of Michael Moorer turned him into a folk hero. Away from the ring, Foreman's genial TV persona and ministry work reframed the once fearsome champion as an affable mentor. Then came a second act. Few athletes achieved the George Foreman grill, a mass-market phenomenon that cemented his name in everyday kitchens. When Foreman died on March 21, 2025 at 76, the tributes hailed not only a titan of the ring, but a man who mastered life's second chance as discipline, reborn as grace power, tempered by warmth. Foreman's second act was as astonishing as his first. After losing to Muhammad Ali in the 1974 Rumble in the Jungle, he drifted into retirement in 1977, eventually finding purpose as a preacher in Houston. A decade later, in 1987, he returned to the ring, not as the menacing destroyer of the 1970s, but as a smiling, heavier middle-aged fighter with a sense of humor. Skeptics dismissed his comeback as a novelty. Yet, Foreman proved them wrong again and again, piling up wins with an awkward grace and undiminished power. The culmination came in 1994, when at 45 years old, he knocked out Michael Moorer to regain the heavyweight title, rewriting history. Beyond boxing, Foreman became a household name through the George Foreman Grill, a product that sold over 100 million units and transformed his image from ex-champion to genial pitchman. He leaned into this reinvention, embracing his role as a father of 10 children, a community pastor, and an enduring presence in popular culture. Even into his 70s, Foreman remained visible, offering commentary on major fights, lending support to young boxers, and embodying the possibility of redemption through resilience. The late years of his life were marked not by decline, but by testimony, proof that failure can be temporary, but faith and persistence endure. George Foreman died on March 21, 2025, at the age of 76. His family confirmed that he passed in Texas after a brief illness, bringing to a close one of the most extraordinary life arcs in American sports. News outlets immediately replayed the images that defined him, the young Colossus crushing Joe Frazier in 1973 to claim the heavyweight crown, the humbled challenger falling to Muhammad Ali in Zaire a year later, and the grinning veteran raising his fist in 1994, shocking the world by reclaiming the title at 45. Reactions poured in swiftly. Fellow fighters praised his power, but spoke even more about his generosity and warmth. Fans remembered his larger-than-life presence, whether in the pulpit at ringside or on television, pitching his famous grill. Broadcasters called him a man of second chances, and social media overflowed with stories of chance encounters where he had offered kindness. But was Foreman's greatest triumph really in the ring, or in the way he transformed defeat and doubt into hope, both for himself and for millions who saw in him a model of resilience? His final chapter leaves us with that question, an open reflection on how strength is measured. George Foreman's legacy extends far beyond his record as a two-time heavyweight champion. In the ring, he is remembered as one of the most fearsome punchers of all time, a man whose raw power could topple even the toughest opponents. Yet his career was not just about victories, it was about transformation. The brash young destroyer of the 1970s became in later life a genial ambassador for the sport, living proof that reinvention is possible. His comeback in 1994 remains one of boxing's greatest stories, a testament to perseverance, faith, and the idea that age does not have to define achievement. Outside boxing, his cultural reach was immense. The George Foreman grill turned him into a household name across generations, a product that sold in the hundreds of millions and linked his name to healthy living as much as heavyweight glory. Tributes after his passing spoke not only of a champion, but of a mentor, a preacher, and a father who used his platform to inspire. Fans mourned with admiration, celebrating a man who lived multiple lives and left each fuller than he found it. In George Foreman, the world lost a giant, but his story continues to stand as a reminder that strength comes not only from power, but from grace in renewal. Val Kilmer, born in 1959, was one of Hollywood's most mercurial leading men. Rising from Juilliard's drama program, he carried a restless energy that made him magnetic on screen. His breakout in Top Secret and Real Genius revealed a quick wit, but it was Top Gun 1986 that catapulted him into the stratosphere as the cool, calculating Iceman. Kilmer refused to be boxed in. He embodied Jim Morrison in The Doors, with uncanny commitment slipped into the cape and cowl as Batman Forever, and infused each role with intensity that could be both thrilling and volatile. Critics often noted his perfectionism and occasional clashes with directors, but few denied the raw charisma he brought to every frame. In later years, Kilmer faced a different battle: throat cancer that left his voice nearly destroyed and required a tracheostomy. His resilience turned illness into testimony through his memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, and the acclaimed documentary Val. He allowed audiences to see the artist behind the myth, stripped of vanity, yet brimming with candor. By the time of his passing in 2025, Kilmer's legacy had stretched far beyond blockbuster roles. He had become a symbol of artistic devotion, vulnerability, and survival against the odds. Val Kilmer's later career was marked by a battle far more personal than any on-screen duel. In 2015, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, a disease that left him struggling for breath, robbed him of much of his voice, and forced him into multiple rounds of surgery, including a tracheostomy. Once renowned for his resonant baritone and commanding presence, Kilmer had to relearn how to communicate. For many, the illness might have meant retreat. For Kilmer, it became a new stage. He spoke candidly in interviews and in his memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, about fear, faith, and the struggle to keep creating. The 2021 documentary Val further revealed this vulnerability built from decades of home videos and reflections recorded during his illness. The film reframed him not as a fallen idol, but as an artist willing to let the public see fragility alongside brilliance. Kilmer's brief return to Top Gun: Maverick in 2022 was a symbolic victory audiences wept as Iceman appeared on screen, silent yet eloquent, embodying resilience itself. In his final years, Kilmer split time between California and New Mexico, surrounded by family and art projects. Though his body weakened, he pursued painting, poetry, and mentorship, channeling creative energy into every space left open to him. The closing decade of his life was not about loss, but transformation, his career evolving from leading man bravado into testimony of endurance and grace. Val Kilmer died on July 6, 2025, at the age of 65 after years of complications linked to throat cancer. His family confirmed that he passed peacefully at his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he had spent much of his final decade painting, writing, and surrounded by loved ones. News of his death reverberated instantly across Hollywood. Colleagues from every era, Top Gun co-stars, fellow stage actors, directors he had once clashed with, offered tributes that blended admiration for his talent with respect for the resilience he had shown in his final years. Fans revisited the arc of his career, from the effortless cool of Iceman to the hypnotic embodiment of Jim Morrison, from the brooding shadow of Batman to the tender vulnerability of his later work. The release of Top Gun: Maverick in 2022, in which he returned briefly but powerfully, was cited repeatedly as a fitting farewell gesture, a reminder that even without his full voice, Kilmer could command attention with presence alone. But was this final appearance merely a nostalgic curtain call, or was it Kilmer's ultimate act of defiance, an artist insisting that expression could transcend the loss of his greatest tool? The question lingers as enigmatic as the man himself. Val Kilmer's legacy lies in the intensity of his craft and the vulnerability of his later years. On screen, he was fearless, an actor who inhabited roles so completely that they often outlived the films themselves. His Jim Morrison in The Doors remains one of the most immersive biographical performances ever attempted, while his turn as Doc Holliday in Tombstone showed a mix of menace, wit, and fragility that critics still celebrate. Even his more turbulent experiences, such as Batman Forever, revealed his refusal to coast. He demanded authenticity in an industry built on compromise. Yet what deepened his legacy was the courage he showed off-screen. His memoir and the documentary Val allowed fans to witness not just a star, but a man confronting mortality with candor and artistry. In doing so, he redefined what it meant to be a public figure, no longer the untouchable icon, but a human being who could still create, inspire, and connect, even as illness reshaped his voice. Tributes after his death emphasized not only his talent, but his bravery, the way he turned suffering into testimony. For admirers, Val Kilmer will always be remembered as a paradox, both enigmatic and deeply open, both dazzling and wounded. In that tension lay his truth, and in that truth lies his enduring power. Gene Hackman, born in 1930, was often described as the actor's actor, a performer who brought raw humanity to every role. From his breakthrough in Bonnie and Clyde, 1967, to his Oscar-winning performance in The French Connection, 1971, Hackman mastered characters that felt lived in, flawed, and unforgettable. His career spanned 4 decades of relentless excellence, moving seamlessly from hard-edged crime dramas to comedies, westerns, and even family films. He won 2 Academy Awards and received 3 Golden Globes, securing his place among Hollywood's greatest craftsmen. Hackman's talent lay not in movie star glamour, but in authenticity. He could project menace, vulnerability, or warmth, with equal ease inhabiting roles so deeply that audiences forgot they were watching an actor. His later work in Unforgiven 1992 earned him a 2nd Oscar, and films like Hoosiers and The Royal Tenenbaums revealed a surprising tenderness beneath his steely exterior. When he retired from acting in 2004, Hackman left behind a body of work that few could rival. For years, he lived quietly in New Mexico, turning to writing novels and avoiding the spotlight. By the time of his death in 2025, at the age of 95, tributes emphasized not just his awards, but his influence, a reminder that true greatness in cinema is measured by truthfulness, not fame. After decades of critical acclaim and box office success, Gene Hackman chose a quiet exit from Hollywood. In 2004, following Welcome to Mooseport, he announced his retirement, explaining that he no longer felt the need to endure the grueling pace of film production. Instead, he settled in Santa Fe, New Mexico, embracing a life of privacy, far from the red carpets and cameras. Yet, retirement did not mean idleness. Hackman turned to writing, co-authoring several historical and adventure novels, with Daniel Lenihan channeling his storytelling instincts into prose. He occasionally surfaced in interviews, his gravelly voice and sharp wit intact, offering reflections on his career and the craft of acting. Admirers often remarked on how content he seemed, having traded the frenzy of sets for the steady rhythm of writing, painting, and long drives through the desert. Even in absence, Hackman's presence loomed. Directors and actors cited him as an influence, pointing to his precision, naturalism, and refusal to flatter either himself or the audience. While others courted nostalgia, Hackman resisted comebacks, protecting the integrity of his body of work. His later years thus became a different kind of performance, one of discipline, restraint, and self-knowledge, showing that an actor's greatest power might be in knowing when to leave the stage. Gene Hackman died on April 5, 2025, at the age of 95, passing away peacefully at his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His family shared that he had been in declining health, but remained surrounded by loved ones in his final days. The news struck Hollywood with both sadness and reverence. For many, Hackman had felt almost eternal, a figure whose performances remained so vital that it was difficult to imagine cinema without him. Tributes poured in from directors like Clint Eastwood and Wes Anderson, who praised not only his talent, but his unyielding discipline. Fellow actors recalled his intensity on set, demanding precise but also generous once the camera rolled. Fans revisited the moments that defined his career: Popeye Doyle tearing through New York streets in The French Connection, Coach Norman Dale inspiring underdogs in Hoosiers, and the ruthless sheriff Little Bill Daggett in Unforgiven. But was Hackman's greatest triumph found in awards and iconic roles, or in the decision to step away at the height of his powers, preserving the integrity of his craft? His final act leaves us with that question, challenging us to see not just what he gave on screen, but what he chose to withhold in silence. Gene Hackman's legacy is one of uncompromising truth. He was never a matinee idol in the conventional sense, yet he became one of the most respected and versatile actors in American cinema. His characters, whether the obsessive cop Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, the tyrannical sheriff in Unforgiven, or the weary but inspiring coach in Hoosiers, were grounded in humanity layered with flaws that made them feel real. This authenticity influenced generations of actors who sought to emulate his naturalism, his refusal to play to the gallery, and his instinct to serve the story rather than his own image. In mourning him, Hollywood emphasized not only his artistry, but his integrity. By retiring in 2004 and never looking back, Hackman preserved a career unmarred by nostalgia-driven comebacks. He left behind a filmography that feels complete, a portfolio of work that speaks for itself, without the need for epilogue. Colleagues described him as exacting but generous. Fans remembered the way his performances lingered long after the credits rolled. Hackman's death marked the closing of a chapter in cinema's golden era, but his influence continues to echo. For many, he represents a model of excellence without vanity, a reminder that acting at its best is about truth, restraint, and respect for the audience. In that sense, Gene Hackman remains immortal. David Lynch, born in 1946, was one of cinema's most singular voices, an artist who blurred the line between dreams and nightmares, beauty and horror. His work redefined what audiences expected from both film and television, with stories that were at once hauntingly surreal and emotionally raw. Early acclaim came with Eraserhead 1977, a midnight movie marvel that announced his fascination with the uncanny hidden in ordinary life. Hollywood soon recognized his daring with The Elephant Man, 1980, earning him multiple Oscar nominations and proving that his strangeness could be deeply human. In 1986, Blue Velvet shocked and captivated viewers, peeling back the idyllic surface of small-town America to reveal violence and desire lurking beneath. But it was Twin Peaks 1990 that made him a cultural phenomenon, turning television into a canvas for mystery, dream logic, and eccentricity. Throughout his career, Lynch pursued painting, music, and meditation alongside filmmaking, cultivating a reputation as both visionary auteur and eccentric sage. By the time of his passing in 2025, Lynch had long since entered the pantheon of directors whose names defined an adjective Lynchian, a synonym for the uncanny poetry of everyday terror. His death marked not only the loss of an artist, but the silencing of a voice that had taught generations to see strangeness as truth. David Lynch's later years were a mixture of reflection, creation, and retreat. After the audacious return of Twin Peaks, the return in 2017, which critics hailed as one of the boldest works ever made for television, Lynch effectively stepped back from large-scale filmmaking. He did not deliver another feature after Inland Empire 2006, but he refused to vanish. Instead, he immersed himself in painting, sculpture, and music, continuing to explore the textures of mood and dream through other mediums. In interviews, Lynch often spoke about his daily meditation practice, which he credited with sustaining his creativity and sense of peace. Fans who followed him online delighted in his quirky weather reports and cheerful updates, glimpses of an artist who could be both surrealist prophet and affable neighbor. Even without a new film, his presence lingered in culture. Young filmmakers cited him constantly as an influence, and the term Lynchian became a shorthand for the uncanny blend of suburban normalcy and lurking dread. The last phase of his career revealed a man unburdened by the pressure to produce. He found joy in the small acts of creation, mixing soundscapes, painting canvases, or simply crafting daily rituals of strangeness for his audience. For admirers, Lynch's final years embody the very lesson of his work. That meaning is found not in clarity, but in persistence, the commitment to keep making, keep seeing, even when the world seems inexplicable. David Lynch died on August 13, 2025, at the age of 79 at his Los Angeles home. His family shared that he passed peacefully surrounded by loved ones after a brief illness. For admirers of his work, the announcement carried the eerie symmetry of a filmmaker whose career had been devoted to endings that were both inevitable and inexplicable. News outlets immediately revisited the imagery that defined his art: the flickering light bulb in Eraserhead, the suburban shadows of Blue Velvet, the cherry pie, and damn fine coffee of Twin Peaks. Colleagues described him as a visionary who had reshaped both American cinema and television, while younger directors spoke of him as a mentor whose imagination gave them permission to risk strangeness. Fans lit up social media with quotes from Agent Cooper and Laura Palmer, reminders of how Lynch's creations bled into the collective subconscious. But was his death simply the quiet closing of a singular career? Or was it in true Lynchian fashion another mystery, an invitation to keep searching for meaning in the uncanny and unresolved? Even in passing, Lynch left a final riddle: how to live with strangeness and how to find beauty in it. David Lynch's legacy is measured not only in awards or box office numbers, but in the way he expanded the language of moving images. He taught audiences that horror and humor, beauty and dread can coexist in the same frame. His films, Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, are now regarded as milestones of modern cinema, studied for their ability to disturb and enchant at once. With Twin Peaks, he reshaped television forever, proving that the small screen could be as daring and poetic as film. The very word Lynchian endures as cultural shorthand for the uncanny, the surreal, hidden inside the mundane. In mourning him, colleagues spoke of his generosity, his mentorship of young filmmakers, and his insistence on pursuing vision over compromise. Fans remembered not just the unsettling dreamscapes, but the warmth with which he greeted them, his gentle weather reports, his passion for meditation, his ability to make the bizarre somehow comforting. His passing left a sense of unfinished mystery, as though the world itself had lost a lens through which its strangeness once made sense. David Lynch will be remembered as a master of the in-between light and shadow dream, and reality, terror, and tenderness. In that duality lies his immortality, and in the morning of his death, we are reminded of how much he taught us to see. As the curtain falls on this chapter of Echoes of Fame, we are left with 5 extraordinary lives: Richard Chamberlain, George Foreman, Val Kilmer, Gene Hackman, and David Lynch. Each in their own way reshaped culture, carrying us from the intimacy of television dramas to the thunder of the boxing ring, from Hollywood blockbusters to timeless American cinema, and into the surreal landscapes of imagination. Their departures mark the end of eras, but their legacies remain woven into the stories we tell, the art we revisit, and the memories that still inspire us. Their lives remind us that greatness is not found in perfection, but in persistence, reinvention, and truth. And as we remember them, the question lingers for each of us: which of these voices, faces, or visions spoke most deeply to you? Thank you for watching and honoring their journeys with us. If these stories moved you, please share your reflections below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we continue to revisit the echoes of fame.